Hello, friends and fellow readers. My name is Becca and welcome to my channel. I am so glad that you are here. Now, if you are an Alan Gratz fan, which, let's be real, so many of us are, you are going to really enjoy today's First Chapter Friday Read Aloud. We are going to be reading the first chapter of Allies. All right, we're going to start off by reading the front and side cover to get an idea of what this novel is going to be about. The fate of the world is in their hands. June 6th, 1944. The Nazis are terrorizing Europe on their evil quest to conquer the world. The only way to stop them? The biggest, most top secret endeavor ever, with the Allied nations coming together to storm German-occupied France. Welcome to D-Day. D, a young U.S. soldier, is on a boat racing toward the French coast. And D, along with his brother in arms, is terrified. He feels the weight of World War II on his shoulders. But D is not alone. Behind enemy lines in France, a girl named Samira works as a spy, trying to sabotage the German army. Meanwhile, paratrooper James leaps from his plane to join a daring midnight raid. And in the thick of battle, Henry, a medic, searches for lives to save. In a breathtaking race against time, they all must fight to complete their high-stakes missions. But with betrayals and deadly risks at every turn, can the Allies do what it takes to win? So I personally love historical fiction. I love reading and getting facts and information about things I may not know a lot about. So I'm really excited about this novel. They put a really nice little map in the front that you can refer to, which shows you a little bit about D-Day and where it took place. And that being said, we are going to start with this first part here, which is Operation Neptune, June 6th, 1944, just before dawn on the English Channel. And the chapter is titled, A Hunting We Will Go. D. Carpenter's foot slipped off the wet ladder and his stomach lurched into his throat. He scrabbled for a handhold, but the weight of his pack and his rifle dragged him down. At the same instant, a gap opened up between the huge transport ship he was leaving and the little motorboat he was supposed to be climbing into. D dropped like a stone toward the cold black water of the English Channel. A hand shot out and caught the pack on D's back. D jolted, then swung around into the side of the ship with a thwump. "Grab on," his friend Sid Jacobstein yelled. With shaking, frozen hands, D fumbled until he was clinging to the side of the ladder. "Legs up," Sid told him. D pulled his feet up in time to keep them from getting crushed as the motorboat drifted back to clang against the side of the transport ship. D took a deep breath and closed his eyes in relief. "For crying out loud, D, you just about killed yourself before the Germans could do it for you," Sid said. Sid had been right below D on the ladder, and now they were face to face. With his free hand, D grabbed Sid's shoulder. "Thanks, Sid," he said, still panting. "I owe you one." "Private Carpenter, Private Jacobstein, if you two knuckleheads are done fooling around, we've got a boat to load," Sergeant Taylor called from above. D and Sid helped each other climb into the small boat. They took their places halfway back in a row of other soldiers wearing olive green assault jackets and green metal helmets. Though they wore the same uniform, D and Sid could have resembled each other less. D was 16 and looked even younger. He had spindly arms and legs, and he worried that his baggy green army trousers made him look like a child playing soldier. Sid was just a year older, but he was 6 feet 4 inches tall and built like Hank Greenberg, the big, power-hitting left fielder from the Detroit Tigers. He could have bent D into a pretzel if he wanted to. Sid had a long face, curly brown hair, tan skin, and stubble on his jaw. D was blonde-haired and pale-skinned, and he couldn't grow a mustache if his life depended on it. What had first united them was their shared hatred of the New York Yankees. Sid was a die-hard Brooklyn Dodgers fan, while D rooted for his hometown baseball team, the Philadelphia Athletics. The Dodgers will be back in the World Series as soon as the war is over. You'll see, Sid said to Dee, continuing the conversation that had begun on the troop transport ship. Of course they had an off-season last year. Half of the team enlisted to fight. Another soldier overheard them. Are you kidding? He said. His New York accent was even stronger than Sid's. The Yankees lost as many players, including Joe DiMaggio, and they won the pennant and the World Series. How Sid, or any of the rest of them, could think about baseball right now, could think about anything besides their impending doom, astounded Dee. He staggered on the metal deck as the boat rocked from side to side on the waves, and Sid steadied him to keep him from falling. They were in one of the famous Higgins boats that Dee had heard about, but it wasn't much to look at. It was basically a big metal bathtub with a motor at the back and a tall door at the front. But Dee knew that its flat bottom was what made the boat special. It allowed the boat to run right up onto the beach, drop the front door, deliver its 40 passengers, and then back out, reload, and make another run. It was this Higgins boat that would deliver Dee and Sid and the rest of their platoon to Omaha Beach in Normandy, France. The Allied invasion of Europe was about to begin. Since the war started 5 years ago, Nazi Germany had rolled across Europe, blitzing through Poland and the Netherlands and Belgium and France. Now, the map that had hung in Dee's high school history classroom back in Philadelphia was all wrong. Instead of a bunch of different colored countries in Europe, there was just one big red blob, Germany, covering everything. And if Germany's demented leader, Adolf Hitler, and his armies had their way, that big red blob would grow and grow and grow until it covered the whole world. Unless Dee and everyone else here put a stop to it. Dee couldn't see over the top of the Higgins boat's high walls, but he knew how many other ships there were out on the water. He'd seen them gathered last night at what the British sailors on his transport ships had dubbed Piccadilly Circus, after a famous traffic intersection in London. Hundreds of ships, thousands, transport ships, destroyers, battleships as long as skyscrapers turned on their sides, minesweepers dragging the sea for German mines, and more that Dee couldn't even identify. Their lights had glittered like stars in the night. There at Piccadilly Circus, where all the ships had come together, Dee and Sid had been up on the top deck when they heard a Scottish soldier on the British ship belt out, "The road to the Isles," on his bagpipes. The piper got laughs and applause from all the other soldiers waiting on their transports, and more GIs on Dee's ship came up from below to listen. Not to be outdone, a United States battleship broadcast "God Bless America" over its loudspeakers, and Dee and Sid and the boys around them whooped. A Free French ship played La Marseillaise, a national anthem of the country that they had lost and were going back to reclaim, and Dee got the chills. Sailors on a Canadian ship joined in with "O Canada," and some Australian soldiers sang "Waltzing Matilda." There were more songs too, songs in Polish and Norwegian and Dutch, so many that Dee couldn't hear all of them at once. An English ship had capped it all off by playing a record of "A Hunting We Will Go" and gotten the biggest cheer of all. But nobody was cheering now, and nobody was singing. Sid wasn't even talking baseball anymore. They had all grown quiet as the remainder of their platoon climbed down from the transport ship into the Higgins boat. It was still dark out, and they couldn't see France, couldn't tell how far away they were from shore. But suddenly they were hit with the cold, hard reality that it was finally about to happen. After months of training, months of planning, months of waiting, Dee and Sid and everyone else, more than 150,000 soldiers, were about to be delivered right into the jaws of death. Today was D-Day, the most important day of the Second World War, maybe the most important day in all of human history. Dee got goosebumps just thinking about it. Everything was riding on this day. If they screwed it up, the world would never be the same. The weight of the moment pushed down on Dee and the others. The dull, heavy sound of the small boat clanging against the side of the transport ship sounded like a church bell, tolling their deaths. Word is anywhere from a quarter of us to half of us are going to die before we ever get off the beach, Sid said. Dee's stomach tightened. They'd all heard those same odds. They all knew that when they landed on the beach, the German army would be waiting for them with machine guns and mortars and mines. Dee glanced around. Even the veterans among them, the guys in their 20s who had fought in Algeria and Italy and other places, even they were silent, sinking into whatever lonely thoughts a man thinks about in the hours before he might die. A soldier behind Sid gave him a shove. Not such a big man now, are you, Yid? He sneered. Dee felt Sid tense up beside him. Yid was a slur for a Jewish person, and Sid was the only Jewish guy in their platoon. The fact that his first name rhymed with Yid had made it a funny nickname since boot camp. You'd think he'd be happy, another soldier said, always talking about killing Krauts. Krauts, along with Jerry's, was a word a lot of them used for the Germans. But Sid the Yid's just as scared as the rest of us. Ever since he'd arrived at boot camp, if Sid wasn't talking about the Dodgers, he was talking about killing Germans. Lots of soldiers were here because they'd been drafted. The guys who volunteered, they usually did it for things like patriotism or glory or to have a steady job. But Dee knew that for Sid, the war in Germany was personal. For years now, the Nazi had been rounding up the Jews in Europe and taking everything they owned and making them into slaves. Sid was out for revenge. Dee turned to face the soldiers who were ragging on Sid. Leave him alone, Dee said. One of the soldiers laughed. The Yid can't even fight his own fights. Dee saw Sid's fists clench. Sid was half a head taller than either of the other soldiers and had 50 pounds on each of them, but he didn't take a swing. Sid and Dee both knew what happened when a Jewish guy punched somebody for insulting them. They'd seen it happen again and again in basic training. It was the Jew who got in trouble, not the other guy. I'm saving it for the Krauts, fathead, Sid said. I'm going to kill the first German I see and then every single Kraut I meet from Normandy to Berlin. The two soldiers shook their head and looked away. Sid nodded his thanks to Dee for sticking up for him, but it didn't make Dee feel better. In fact, it made him feel worse. Sid was Dee's best friend in the army, his only friend. They knew almost everything there was to know about each other, except the one big giant thing that Dee had hidden from Sid and from the rest of the men in his platoon. Everybody called him Dee, because that was the first letter of the name of his dog tag, D. Carpenter, short for Douglas Carpenter. But what Sid and the others didn't know, could never know, was that Douglas Carpenter wasn't Dee's real name at all. His real name was Dietrich Zimmerman, and he was German. I got goosebumps multiple times throughout that first chapter. I don't know about you guys. Very intense, very interesting, very engaging. If you enjoyed this first chapter Friday Read Aloud, please consider liking and subscribing so you can be notified every time we have a new First Chapter Friday available for you to hear. On that note, friends, I will let you go. Happy reading.